question time and question to the Executive Office, and I call Maurice Bradley to ask the first question. Maurice
Thank
Bradley.
you, Mr. Speaker. Question 1.
Call Deputy First Minister.
The Executive's COVID-19 Task Force, chaired by the Interim Hawks, meets regularly and reports to the Executive on a weekly basis. The Task Force has 4 work streams: adherence, protect, communications and recovery. The Adherence Group is working on the development of a longitudinal survey, which is designed to give more information on adherence on an individual basis and to influence policy development as we continue along our pathway out of restrictions and remain reliant on people making safer choices to contain the virus. In communications, as we've moved away from stay local message and relaxed guidance on the common travel area and adopted the Green List for international travel, we are focusing our message on the behaviour of the individual. This will be designed to inform and enable people to make safer choices on how to keep themselves safe and reduce the risk of transmission. The Protect work stream is led by the Department of Health and involves the great work on the rollout of the vaccination programme. Under recovery work, continues to progress the development of a cross-cutting recovery strategy for delivery over the next 24 months. The Task Force also runs the Cross-Departmental Working Group, which meets weekly to consider the proposals submitted for the next set of relaxations. And the next major review is on the 10th of June, and the group are currently working through the proposals to be submitted for consideration at that point.
Supplementary, Maurice Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answers. Can I ask the Deputy First Minister what solutions through the Task Force 4 work streams of protection, recovery, adherence and strategic communication are in line with the rest of the UK?
Well, obviously, we are very much focused on our own recovery, very much working on trying to build on a pathway out of restrictions based around being careful, but also about being ambitious for the future. There will be a COVID summit, which will involve ourselves, Scotland, Wales, England sitting down together, discussing what comes next and plans for the future. But clearly, there's a huge job of work to be done around recovery and rebuilding, and that's why we're very much focused on trying to come at it from a holistic point of view, tying in the programme for government commitments, tying in sort of short and medium-term recovery interventions from both a health, societal and community perspective, but then also jump-starting longer-term renewal with the programme for government work. So I think we've got a huge job ahead of us, but certainly we have a roadmap at least to charge us through that.
I call Martina Anderson.
Thank the Minister for that update on the COVID Task Force. Minister, could you give us an update on the rollout of the vaccine, specifically the efficacy of the vaccine against the new variants?
Thanks to the member for the question, and most certainly from the outset, can I say, Can Corlia, probably on behalf of us all, that we want to express our huge debt of gratitude to all those that are involved in the vaccination programme, because it's been strong work, dedication and commitment through the last year that's actually got us to this point today. So we're very grateful for that work, and I can continue to confirm that the vaccination programme is really progressing so well, with the prioritisation as recommended by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. As of, I think we've now more than 70% of the adult population have had their first dose, and more than 40% have had their second dose. And also we were looking very closely, because people are concerned about new variants, and in terms of effectiveness against the vaccine, limited information is available, but obviously we'll continue to watch that and keep it under review. But that's why it's really essential that people continue to take up the vaccine, and I take this opportunity again today to encourage people to, if you haven't yet got the vaccine, please take your opportunity to have it. It's our best protection alongside people's own individual behaviour.
Mark Durgan.
And I thank the Minister for her answers thus far. Could the Minister tell us what proactive work that the Task Force is doing to help educate and inform businesses who may be inadvertently breaching rules and regulations, rather than simply taking a punitive approach?
Well, we've very much taken that approach the whole way through. I think that's the best way to proceed, that we actually work with people to provide the advice. There's guidance for a whole range of sectors, which has been developed in line with, or in tandem with, the sectors themselves. We continue to keep that under review. If there are any areas in particular the member wants to refer to, we're more than happy to hear from you. But certainly it's really, really important that as we build and plan to take ourselves out of COVID into the recovery phase, that we work with those that are in the front line in terms of business and industry who are trying to rebuild their businesses from such a devastating impact of the pandemic.
Call Claire Bailey.
Speaker, Minister, can you give us an update on what the task force has been looking at in terms of dealing with the scenes that we've seen last September during Freshers in the Holy Lands? And I know that the task force is set up to look at that as well, but what work's been done with the students' unions and the universities to try and alleviate some of the scenes that we've seen last year?
In terms of preparation for that period, which will be fast approaching, it's really important that you work on that cross departmental basis, because there's a lot of people who have a role to play. Our councils, for example, the local council has to be involved. So I've no doubt that the work that was done previously will be replicated again now in advance of Freshers, and I'll actually seek an update on that at our executive meeting on Thursday.
I call John O'Dowd.
Can call you Case Rideau, question number 2.
The New Decade New Approach document sets out an ambitious package of measures covering a broad range of social, economic and cultural issues, and it's important that we deliver on all of them. Excellent progress has been already made across a lot of executive departments. Our department, for example, has made progress in relation to providing support for victims and survivors of historical abuse, the conduct of executive business, EU exit, and as we start to emerge from the executive's focus on managing the COVID pandemic and charting a path for recovery, we are committed to delivering NDNA and moving on all those things that have been delayed to this point. The executive will have the opportunity to consider the totality of the proposals in the context of the ongoing work to bring forward the new programme for government.
Supplementary, John O'Dowd.
Again, thank the Minister for her answers thus far. Minister, given the fact that these institutions were re-established on the basis of the New Decade New Approach, would you agree with me that it's now time for not only the executive but for the British and Irish governments to ensure that it's fully implemented?
In its simplest form, yes. I absolutely agree with the members. I think as we step our way out of the shadow of COVID-19, we now need to see delivery upon the New Decade New Approach political deal, which provided us all with the potential for a new beginning of proper, inclusive power-sharing government. It provided a new context for politics to work for all of our people on the basis of equality and respect and of parity of esteem. So that means whenever political agreements are made, the public rightly expect, and naturally so, to see follow-through with commitments being delivered by parties and by governments. And as members across this chamber know, as do the Irish and British governments, the commitment to an Irish Language Act and strategy was a key component of the NDNA deal, and that's why we need to see delivery on the language and culture pieces of legislation within this Assembly mandate. And any failure to honour these commitments is just not a sustainable position. So there can be no stepping back on the commitments that were made, and there can be no more false dawns.
Call Claire Sugden.
And I appreciate the Deputy First Minister's response so far. Would the Deputy First Minister provide me with an update on the work around the sustainability of the institutions, specifically the commitment which provides for a 24-week extension period before an Assembly election is called in the event of political instability?
The member will be aware that was part of the commitments which the British Government made, and they are progressing legislation to bring that into line with the commitments that were made in the NDNA document.
Call Cara Hunter.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Deputy First Minister for her answers so far. Can I ask the Minister what coordinated work the Executive is taking to address our waiting lists here? I think we recognise a cross-departmental approach will be necessary. So can I ask what joined-up work has been undertaken? Thank you.
I thank the member for raising that point, and it's something that I've been vocal about myself over the past number of weeks. There's no doubt, I don't think there's anybody in this chamber that would disagree that our waiting lists are totally unacceptable, and the people are struggling to get access to their GPs, and that is likewise unacceptable. So I had made a proposal at the Executive last week that we actually come together, that we apply the same approach that we have taken to fighting back against the pandemic, and apply ourselves to that in terms of the waiting list situation, because it has to be got under control. I have proposed that we have a health summit, or whatever you may want to call it, but that we bring all the political parties, because we have to remove the politics from this very serious issue, bring all the political parties, the trade unions, patient representatives, the policymakers. Let's bring everybody together and create a plan, identify solutions, and work together to transform our health service that delivers for everybody, because that's ultimately what we all want. There's no doubt that the health service has been starved of funding for many, many years. And I think that what we need to do is find solutions, get people access to the healthcare that they deserve, and transform our health service, as I said.
Paula Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Deputy First Minister. Last week, my colleague John Blair and I stood with the Irish language campaigners on the steps of Stormont. But of equal importance to me is the progression of the Sign Language Act, and I'm just wondering what your office is doing to proceed with that long-awaited act. Thank you.
Can I just concur with you? I equally share the same passion to see those things delivered upon. The public rightly expect the NDNA commitments that were made to be delivered upon. We have no doubt been sidetracked and having to deal with the pandemic, and that's obviously put a lot of things sort of off the time that you would expect to see things coming through. But as we're in this phase now of coming out of the COVID crisis and hopefully into better days, now is the time for us to focus efforts in bringing forward all the other pieces of legislation that we're committed upon. We have a small window left in this mandate. We need to move at pace and bring forward the maximum pieces of legislation that we possibly can.
Christopher Stalford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The delivery of agreements, of course, requires a generosity of spirit and a spirit of respect. In the vein of the spirit of respect, what respect does it send to the community that I represent that the party opposite vetoed an attempt to light up this building to remember innocent victims of terrorism? What message of respect is sent to the community that I represent by the vetoing of a memorial stone to mark the centenary of the foundation of this country? And what respect is sent to the community that I represent by the failure, by the vetoing even, of the planting of some flowers in the grounds of this estate? How does that petty disrespect convey anything other than contempt to the people that I represent?
Can I say to the member that I'm very much committed to an inclusive society, and this building where we are all elected, where we're all given a mandate by the public, it's really, really important that it also demonstrates and we can see ourselves reflected. And unfortunately, there is an imbalance in this estate at this moment in time. But let's work together. Let's make it a more inclusive place. Let's find a way to have a conversation about how we can do that. That we demonstrate respect, because no one's anything to fear from demonstrating respect, and no one's anything to fear from party of esteem. I'm committed to that. Why don't you join me in trying to deliver that?
I call Robin Newton.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
We recognise the economic, historical and peace-building potential of the Maze Long Kesh site, and will endeavour to find a way forward that will maximise this potential. The timeline for redevelopment and whether this can contribute to recovery in the immediate term will depend on the detail of any resolution reached.
Robin Newton, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer, and I recognise that she recognises the strategic importance of the site for the economy of Northern Ireland. But, Deputy First Minister, as I understand it, there are a number of vacancies on the board, and the board needs the expertise and the vision to move forward. It is also important, I think, that Lisburn and Castlereagh City Council, who have a strategic vision for the immediate area in which the site is located, also be represented on the board. Would the Minister agree with me that there is an urgent need to fill the vacant positions and an urgent need also to have local representation on the board as well?
Thank the member for the question. So you're right, there are currently 6 board members and 1 chair, with 4 board member vacancies. We've recently agreed to extend the appointments of the chair and the members for 18 months until September 2022. That's in order to ensure that the site is effectively managed while we consider its future. And we've also asked officials to start the process to fill the vacancies on the board, and we'd hope to have the new board members in place before March of 2022. So that again will provide for continuity whenever the current members reach the end of their term. In terms of the local council, I'm aware that there is a meeting on the 2nd of June with the local council, and I have no doubt that that issue will be raised around representation, and I'm sure that there can be a good engagement there at that meeting.
Pat Cadney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Does the Minister agree with me that the spending of £1.5 million every year simply to keep the Maze prison site just ticking over the way it is a complete waste of money? And taking in mind of where that site is in relation to my constituency in Lagan Valley and how it could be an economic driver on the corridor between Dublin and Belfast.
Thanks to the member for his question or his comment. I think we all recognise the immense potential of the site, and there's so much that can be done there. So I hope that we can find a resolution that will see the site developed in a way that will maximise its potential. The board continue to keep under review the possible approaches to regeneration of the site and allow them to provide us with advice and options for the future. And in terms of the ongoing maintenance of the site, I mean, it's important that we carry out that essential maintenance. It's important that we ensure that the buildings are safe and that they're watertight and that they're secure and that the site remains ready for development in due course. As I said, I hope that there is an agreement going forward that allows us to develop to the max, the potential of the site.
Call Linda Dillon.
And thank the Deputy First Minister for answers so far. Deputy First Minister, would you agree with me that the hospital wing on the Maze Long Cache site is very important in terms of the potential economic driver and our shared history here? And I genuinely mean our shared history. I spoke only last week actually to a Republican who had brought a number of people from what would be viewed as the other side of the community to the Long Cache site when it was accessible, and they really enjoyed the visit, and it did actually start a conversation around reconciliation and how we need to work together.
Thanks to the member. I mean, I think you're right whenever you talk about the shared history and the significance of the H blocks and the site in our shared history. And I think across our community, the site evokes strong views and also painful memories of loss, imprisonment. The story of Long Cache, I think, provides a lens into our recent history and conflict. So preserving the history of the site while maximising its economic potential is both a clear signal and a challenge that together this executive can deliver for all of our people. In 2021, together, we must see the site as a gateway to opportunity. So let me again say that I see the regeneration and the revitalisation of the site and the social and economic and reconciliation potential that we need to maximise that.
Jim Allister.
After all the concessions that the Minister demands of others, why is she still, and her party, blocking economic development of the Maze and making it subject to glorification of terrorism?
As I have previously said, I recognise the potential of the site, and I hope to find a resolution that will see the site developed. And I think that the societal, the economic and the reconciliation potential of the site is immense, and we should work together to deliver upon that.
Call Pashihan.
Question 4.
Since 2017, the NIO has led on implementing the Stormont House Agreement legacy mechanisms.
Supplementary, Pashihan.
I thank the Minister for her response, and it's all the more important in the context of the recent inquest findings in the Ballymurphy massacre case. And I want to thank the Minister for her unwavering support for the Ballymurphy families. Would the Minister also agree that the shocking and abject failings of the British state, as identified by the coroner, are symptomatic of the British government's disgraceful attempts to block any and every process that would expose the truth of its role in the conflict here?
Thanks to the member for that question, and I too want to acknowledge the bravery and the determination and the resilience of the Ballymurphy families. They have been vindicated in their pursuit of truth, and they now deserve to see justice. It is clear that the British state fears accountability, and that's why they have unilaterally and indeed cynically abandoned their commitment to the Stormont House Agreement. So let me say that any amnesty proposals which seek to put state forces beyond the law are not only a real slap on the face to victims, but they're a further statement that the British government has clearly abandoned their Stormont House and their NDNA commitments.
Call Colin McGrath.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I had asked in a written question to the Executive Office whether there had been joint representations made to the British Government about their financial obligations, and was told that there wasn't, but yet the Justice Minister told us last week that there was. Can we have some clarity as to whether there's been any joint representations made to the British Government for them to fulfil their financial obligations from Stormont House Agreement?
I'm assuming maybe you're referring to the pension issue, perhaps. I haven't saw what the Justice Minister said, so I can't clarify that, but I'm happy to respond to the member in writing. We have made joint requests around funding for the pension, obviously, because these are policy decisions that were taken at Westminster, and therefore by their own statement of funding policy, and then they therefore should also fund the scheme. And given the scale and the quantum that we're not sure of, we need that financial support, so we have made that case.
Mike Nesbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to add a little balance, perhaps, to Mr. Sheehan's framing of his question, would the Minister agree with me that tarring and feathering, that punishment, so-called punishment beatings, that the detonation of no-warning car bombs, that the abduction, torture, killing and hiding of people's bodies, the so-called disappeared, and generally conducting murder, all represent gross human rights abuses?
And I don't even think it's a matter of balance. I think it's about a true reflection of what has been a very difficult and harrowing past. And what we have to do as political leaders of today is try to find a way to heal the wounds of the past, to build bridges, to help people have access to truth and justice. And the only way we'll do that is actually working together.
Call Melissa McHugh.
Gormagot, Concorla. Kesta Cuig, question 5, Minister.
There's been significant. Sorry, I'm going to ask Junior Minister Kearney to answer this question.
There's been significant progress in delivering the Together Building a United Community strategy, with a number of headline actions fully achieved. Over 24,000 young people have taken part in TBUC camps, and 5 urban villages areas have been established. 4 shared education campuses have been approved and are progressing. 10 shared neighbourhoods providing 483 new homes have been completed. Over 6,000 young people have participated in the Peace for Youth programme, and over 26,000 young people have engaged with the Uniting Communities through sport and creativity programme. The number of interface barriers has been reduced by 14, and we remain fully committed to building a united community, demonstrated by the provision of £12 million of executive funding in 2021 to 2022.
Supplementary, Melissa McHugh.
And Minister, I'm sure that you'll agree with me that Together Building a United Community strategy is a crucial piece of work in terms of building a better and shared future. Can you detail for me the financial awards made in this current financial year to support good relations work?
Well, we has done Colda I can confirm to the member that over £18 million of funding has been allocated to the delivery of good relations work in 2021 to 2022. And this level of executive investment represents our commitment to building a future defined by tolerance and respect for all identities and aspirations. It includes £12 million of executive funding to replace shared future funding and £6 million of long-standing TEO baseline funding, which contributes to the funding of the District Council Good Relations programme and fully funds the Community Relations Council and the Minority Ethnic Development Fund. In the member's own constituency, that represents investment in 4 shared neighbourhoods in West Tyrone, providing 48 homes with total funding of around £642,000. Delivery of good relations programming through the United Communities programme in the Derg DEA since 2019. Delivery in the Derg, Sperrin and Strabane town DEAs of £74,889 in 20 to 2021 through the District Council Good Relations programme, and provision of funding of £413,000 in 2020 to 2021 to local organisations through the CRC's core funding scheme and small grant scheme. And I set that out as evidence of the Executive's overall commitment to promote good relations and embed anti-sectarianism across all of our constituencies. Just briefly to revert back to your comment about the crucial work of TBUC. At Kilncorlia, I believe we have to demonstrate and celebrate the value and diversity of equality. And there's a saying, if you cannot see, you cannot be. So our good relations priorities, our commitment to anti-sectarianism, anti-racism, our promotion of equality and social inclusion, all of these need to deliver, because at Kilncorlia, I believe that is the acid test of our united community work.
I'm going to call Justin McNulty.
I would thank the Minister for their answers thus far. Could the Minister detail how much money will be given to youth projects over the key summer months to mitigate against sectarian tensions, some of which are being amplified and exacerbated as a result of certain parties' rejection of the protocol which they ultimately helped cause?
Yes, I thank the member for his question. The Planned Interventions Programme provides funding for community activity to divert young people away from antisocial and potentially criminal behaviour during the summer period. Now, that falls under the remit of the Department of Education. In 2020 to 2021, £290,000 was allocated to the successful delivery of 91 projects, and that involved over 1,100 young people. So I do think that this work is going to be very important in the time going forward. It's essential that we reach out to our young people. We provide the facilities, the resources to ensure that they are diverted away from the grip of criminal, antisocial, potential paramilitary activity, and that they actually are given, during summer months in particular, the space to enjoy sport, their own relations, to engage with one another, and most important of all, to do so under the ambit of TBUC, where we can in fact see many, many more young TBUC ambassadors stepping forward in our society to give good leadership in relation to good relations.
Call Roy Beggs.
Number 6.
I and the First Minister have written to the Westminster Government on behalf of the Executive. We've been seeking urgent clarification of the role of the Executive, both in applying to the Levelling Up Fund and also in the assessment of applications. This clarity is urgently required given that the closing date for the applications to the fund is the 18th of June. In our response, we also set out that it's essential that the Executive views and spending priorities are taken into consideration to ensure that there is maximum benefit and opportunities from this expenditure. The approach to this fund clearly does not build on existing and well-established structures in line with the Executive's agreed position, nor does it give the Executive or our Ministers the normal role in relation to funding of devolved functions. So, whilst recognising that these serious limitations, it's also important that applications are submitted to ensure that we do not lose out on any of the money that's available to us.
Supplementary, Roy Beggs.
I welcome the news that you have engaged with this potential new funding, and particularly given the fact that the Scottish devolved government has not invested significantly in the A75 and A77. I would ask that the Executive would be ensuring that rather than individual ministers grandstanding, that the Executive should be engaging to try and improve that strategic transport network route to Northern Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland, and indeed which also serves the north of England. So I would ask that the Minister would ensure that there is active engagement and additional monies can be drawn down where possible.
Thanks to the member for his comments, and I take that on board in terms of our own deliberations.
Keith Archibald.
Margaret Cancoya, and I thank the Minister for her responses. Obviously, this is something that does need to be explored, notwithstanding the concerns that you have outlined. But I think most people will take Tory promises of levelling up our economy with more than just a pinch of salt. So would the Minister agree that a good start to levelling up would be restoring the huge amounts of funding that has been stripped from our block grant by the British Government over the past decade, and giving it back to the Assembly and Executive to decide where it goes to align with our priorities?
Thanks to the member. I mean, in terms of the Levelling Up Fund, I think we're only due to receive about 20 million from the Levelling Up Fund for this year, so it's not going to be transformative in terms of our economic performance, particularly whenever, as you've referred to yourself, we have a standstill budget from Westminster. So I think if the British Government were serious about a levelling up fund, then it would increase the Executive's budget so that we could work to stimulate economic activity, rebuild public services, tackle our waiting lists and everything else that we have, and to recover from the COVID crisis and the years of Tory austerity.
And that ends the period for listener questions, and we now move to 15 minutes of topical questions, and I call Meg Nesbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Minister agree with me that no member of this House should do or say anything which would endanger the stability or indeed the future of these devolved institutions?
Yes, I think it's important that when we find a way to come back in and to do business together, to power share together last January, that everybody lives up to the political commitments that were made. I think that we need to make politics work for everybody. We'll only do that by working together.
Supplementary, Meg Nesbitt.
Given the coronavirus restrictions are renewed every 3 weeks through the Executive Office, could the Minister confirm whether, if there is no First Minister or Deputy First Minister, those restrictions and those regulations will fall?
Of course, the member is talking in a in a scenario that may not occur. I hope it doesn't occur. I hope that we find a way forward to make politics deliver for everybody, that every citizen feels that their voice is heard in this Assembly and this Executive. I'm committed to power share, and I hope others are too. I'm also committed to delivering upon all political commitments that were made.
I call Pam Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The implementation of the New Decade New Approach deal has been a regular topic for discussion in this chamber and in the media, and often overlooked is the deal's commitment to our sign language community. So does the Deputy First Minister agree that it's time to properly progress a Sign Language Act for Northern Ireland?
Yes, you probably weren't in the chamber. I was actually answering a question about that earlier, but I absolutely agree with you. It is so important that we get all the pieces of legislation that we've committed to get them through. We have a short mandate, short period left in this mandate. Now is the time for delivery, particularly as we move out of the dealing solely nearly with the COVID pandemic.
Supplementary, Pam Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer. And I wanted to ask the Minister if she recognises that for the deaf community, translation is not an added luxury to communication, but it simply provides the most basic of access to information that those of us who do not suffer hearing loss have full access to. And surely she would agree with me that it's completely unacceptable that for those who cannot hear, they don't have any access to that public information that they are entitled to, including the proceedings of their own Northern Ireland Assembly.
Yes, I think that is important, and I mean we hope that we sent a very strong message to the deaf community, particularly throughout the COVID crisis when we had sign language every day along with our public announcements, and we hope that helped to go some way to bridge the communication gap. But we all obviously have a responsibility to make sure that we bridge any communication gaps that exist and do whatever we can to get our message out, because everybody in society is entitled to hear the message.
Call Emma Sheeran.
And I thank the Minister for her answers thus far. Minister, you'll be aware that just last week the Irish language community once again took to the outside of this building to protest. Such is their frustration at the lack of implementation of the Irish language legislation that was agreed. I would repeat that it was agreed. This is not a concession, it's an agreement back in January of 2020. Can you reiterate the need to see the implementation of the Irish language legislation as agreed?
Yes, and let me take the opportunity to commend Dram Jarrig again for their campaign, and all campaigners actually around the Irish language, for their determination to stand up for their rights. And they've had a very colourful and a very inspirational campaign, and they celebrate the language and they make it very clear that it's something to offer for everybody in society. So I want to commend them for that. The commitment to the Irish Language Act and the strategy was a key component of the New Decade New Approach document back in January, alongside many other commitments. So we now need to see delivery in terms of the legislation, because there is a responsibility on the Assembly and the Executive to legislate to protect the rights of Irish language speakers without any further delay.
Supplementary, Emma Sheeran.
Gormagat, and thank you, Minister, for your clear commitment to the Irish language legislation. Would you agree with me that this needs to be implemented before the end of this mandate?
I mean, yes, and we are running out of time. We have a short window left in the mandate, so it's important that we get on now with delivery on the legislation and the public get what they expect, which is that the political agreements that were made are delivered upon.
I call Jim Allister.
Mr. Speaker, the Republican movement had some experience in hostage-taking. As the DUP attempts to put in place a new First Minister, is Sinn Féin in the business of holding the hapless DUP as a hostage on the filling of that post unless and until they meet your demands on the Irish language legislation?
I have no desire to hold anybody hostage. I have a desire to make politics work. I have a desire to have political commitments that were agreed upon delivered. I have a desire to see an Irish Language Act, and there's nobody has anything to fear from that. I have a desire to see all NDNA commitments delivered upon, and I have a desire for a more inclusive society. I would encourage the member to try, maybe perhaps for once, maybe see his way to trying to work with others to try and build a better society.
Supplementary, Jim Allister.
Simple question. Will Sinn Féin nominate a Deputy First Minister if the DUP does not meet your terms? And is that the reality of this absurd system, that a party which has a vested interest in instability, even in a pandemic, can exploit that to its advantage?
It's a matter for the DUP who they decide to nominate and who they decide to put forward. I am committed to power sharing. I hope that others are committed to power sharing. I equally hope that all commitments that have been committed, and there's been strong commitments made around the delivery of the NDNA commitments, all of them, including the Irish language and the culture and language pieces, and they must all be delivered upon. And I expect every political party who sit around the executive table, who power share, to work together to make sure all those things are delivered.
Irma Pat Sheehan, I call Pat Sheehan.
The Minister will be aware of the recent historic vote in the Dáil when TDs backed a Sinn Féin motion on the annexation of Palestinian land by Israel. Would the Minister agree with me that it's important for political institutions and for political leaders to take a stand against what is happening in Palestine?
Personally, yes, of course, I do. And I would take the opportunity to congratulate my party colleagues in the Dáil on passing the motion, which means that the Dáil now stands as the first legislator in Europe to categorically state without equivocation that Israel has carried out the crime of annexation in the occupied Palestinian territories. And I think such solidarity is more than just symbolism, because, as the question states, it is important for Democrats to speak out against the crimes that are being perpetrated on a daily basis in Palestine, not least the recent onslaught against Gaza, which resulted in such horrifying loss of life and destruction. International solidarity played a key role in defeating apartheid in South Africa, and I think that same approach is needed to defeat apartheid in Palestine.
Supplementary, Pat Sheehan.
The ongoing actions of the Israeli state are in breach of international law and UN sanctions and run contrary to the principles of democracy. Would the Minister agree that if a genuine peace process is to be built in the Middle East, then the international community has to take a stand against the Israeli state and ensure that they don't continue to flout international law?
Yeah, I think as a post-conflict society, I believe that we have the responsibility to use our example to demonstrate that fundamental principles such as equality and of human rights are key components of any successful peace process. And as members of that international community, I think that we also have a responsibility to demand that international law is upheld. At present, it's very, very clear that the Palestinian people continue to be denied equality and rights, while Israel continue to flout international law through its illegal occupation of the West Bank and the siege of Gaza. So the UN and the EU should uphold their own rulings by ensuring that Israel faces sanctions for its actions.
Call Alex Eason.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Deputy First Minister for an update on the implementation of the Executive's COVID-19 recovery plan?
So we're continuing to work our way through our recovery plan, and it's broken into sort of three sections. So there's the sort of shorter term, there's the health sort of response, and then there's the short term things that we can do to try and boost the economy, and then there's a longer term plan which incorporates the programme for government. There's a lot of work going on as we speak right across all departments, because everybody has a role. All departments will have a role to play in terms of the recovery piece, and we intend to have a plan that's going to be implemented over a 24-month period. And we have, as I said, a number of significant interventions. I think there's 63 recovery interventions that have been identified that are all cross-cutting, and we believe they'll accelerate the recovery and they'll be a benefit to all of our citizens. There's a number of key themes as emerged as a result of it, and those are labour market recovery, tackling inequalities, the health of the population, and then green recovery and sustainability.
Supplementary, Alex Easton.
Thank you, and thanks the Deputy First Minister for answers so far. Would the Deputy First Minister agree with me that listening to businesses, stability and working together is vital for any COVID recovery plan to work for Northern Ireland?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you, because I think that it's so important that we work across departments, but also working with the industry, because they've been decimated. And, whilst every sector has been hard hit, the tourism sector, the hospitality sector have been particularly hard hit. And I think it's really, really important that as we build for recovery, that we do so together in tandem, working with the sectors to address what they need, and then try and find ways to deliver that for them.
Orlia Flynn, I call Orlia Flynn.
Can I ask the Minister for her response to the extremely worrying situation regarding the crisis it's facing our health system at present in relation to waiting lists?
Yes, thanks for the question. And of course, we're all acutely aware of the enormous pressure that our health service is under, and also the unacceptable long waiting lists that many patients are facing. The difficulties of our system didn't just arrive because of COVID. They've been building for some time. They've been a direct result of years of underfunding, a direct result of Tory austerity, and it's left our health service very much weakened. But there is an onus on us all in political leadership to act now decisively and collectively to address this crisis in the health system, and to do all that we can to modernise and to transform our healthcare system. There can't be any political point scoring this issue. It's far too important. This is people's health. So we need to work supporting the Health Minister, the health system, and all of our healthcare workers who, we couldn't have got through the past 15 months without, because they've just been amazing and outstanding.
Supplementary, Orlia Flynn.
I thank the Joint First Minister for a response, and I agree that this issue certainly does overtake, any sort of party politics right across the board. So is the Minister confident that the Executive can come together to formulate an executive-wide response similar to the work that was done in responding to COVID, that the same executive approach can be taken to try and tackle the waiting lists?
Yeah, thanks. I think that the COVID crisis and the battle against the COVID pandemic has shown the importance of collective action, and it's shown that that approach works. So I think that is precisely the approach that we need to now take to the issue of waiting lists. We can't allow patients to be left facing such long and distressing waits to get the care that they need. It impacts their physical health, their mental health, it impacts on their family, it impacts on their own well-being. So I've already proposed at the Executive that we come together and make this a collective priority, and I think that's crucially important if we're going to get to grips with the situation in our health service right now.
Call Melissa McHugh.
Concorla. Minister, what is your assessment of the British Government's proposal to introduce an amnesty to protect its forces from prosecution over crimes committed during the conflict?
I think the British Government's approach to legacy matters generally is a cause of deep and far-reaching concern. Placing themselves or their own forces above their own laws will have major implications for confidence in the rule of law and also in the administration of justice. It's also quite significantly a slap in the face for many victims, many of whom have campaigned for decades to get the truth and justice. The way to deal with the legacy of our past is not through the provision of amnesties, but through mechanisms that were agreed and negotiated at the Stormont House Agreement. The Government needs to now stop blocking that process and actually start implementing it.
Very brief, Melissa McHugh, supplementary.
Would you agree, Minister, that the British Government is pursuing a course that's in direct contravention of the democratically agreed position?
Yes, the majority of parties in this Assembly, as well as the wider public, broadly supported the Stormont House Agreement, the legacy architecture, as the only way to deal with the legacy of the conflict. They also rejected at that time any form of amnesty or statute of limitations for state forces. So I think that the British Government is absolutely set in its face against that democratic will as they pursue what is an unacceptable unilateral course of action.
Members, time is up. Members, please take your ease for a moment or two to switch the chamber.